Okay, good afternoon to everybody. Can you hear me in Pecos Hall? Excellent.
Yes, we hear you.
Excellent. We are back on for our case, our continuation for the consolidated cases by Goodnight Midstream and Empire, New Mexico. I'm not going to read the numbers again. We'll just keep them continued. Mr. Hearing Officer, I turn the meeting back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Rosato. So if I'm remembering correctly, we're in the middle of questioning by the commission. So Mr. Lamkin, do you have questions for Mr. Merrick?
I don't have any questions.
All right, let me not get ahead of myself. Ms. Tejas, are we back on the record? Okay, I see a thumbs up. All right. Chairman Rosatos, do you have questions for Mr. Merrick?
No, I do not have any questions either.
All right, then we come full circle. Mr. Padilla, redirect of your witness.
Mr. Merrick, are you there? Mr. Merrick?
I do not see him on, Mr. Padilla. Can you give me his first name again?
Frank.
No, there's no such person on right at the moment.
We're giving him a call, Mr.
Okay.
All right. Any luck reaching him, sir? Well, I suppose you could ask Mr. Rankin all your questions. I'm sure he'll give you. Yes.
I don't have 3 hours of questions, Mr. Hollywood. Here we go. I think we just got him in.
My apologies. I was at the wrong link again trying to get in.
All right, Mr. Merrick, I'll just remind you, you're under oath, and it's back to Mr. Padilla on redirect examination.
Mr. Merrick, I just want to make sure that I understand your testimony is the Ross that you have identified is within the vertical limits of the San Andres Formation as shown by your cross sections. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Rankin asked you questions this morning that I took as an implication that only the eastern side of the Central Basin platform had a Ross. Do you have an opinion as to whether you could have a Ross in the western side of the Central Basin platform?
Well, I think that you can.
You've already concluded that in the EMSU, which is on the western side of the Central Basin platform, is in the western side, correct?
Correct.
You're not making an economic analysis. That wasn't your chore in this case, right?
That is correct.
Once having made the determination that there is a Ross underlying the EMSU, do you believe there's a potential for Ross development in the San Andres Formation underlying the EMSU?
Yes, I do.
You're not saying one way or the other how prolific or anything of that sort, because that's not the kind of analysis that you were asked to perform, correct?
I didn't catch the first part of your question. I apologize.
You did not make an economic analysis as to the potential for Ross development and the EMSU, underlying the EMSU.
That is correct.
You're simply saying that there's potential for Ross development underlying the EMSU.
Yes.
Now, you were asked questions about your flat price evaluation back in 1986 and 1988. At that time, according to that paper that you were shown and introduced as a cross exhibit, the price of oil was $18 a barrel, correct?
I believe that's correct.
A lot has changed since that time. Would you agree?
Yes, it's changed many times up and down. Oil price.
Including Ross developments, right?
Yes.
Mr. Rankin asked you some questions about oil in place calculations, and that you don't have any oil in place calculations, correct, that you did yourself?
Not for the raws. That's correct.
Now, he also took you through a series of emails suggesting that perhaps you had a bigger assignment from Empire that would include oil in place calculations. That was never part of your assignment, correct?
That is correct.
He also took you into some of Mr. McShane's testimony and oil in place calculations. Do you have any information or knowledge about how Mr. McShane made those oil in place calculations?
No, sir, I do not.
Now, Mr. Rankin also asked you about the word that you used in your self-affirmed statement. You used the word likely. Let me ask you about that word. When you talk in terms of probability or foreseeability, how do you, for drowning up of oil reserve, is it more likely than not that given the type of injections that Goodnight is going to put and is actually putting into the reservoir, what is your opinion as to the damage that could be done to the reservoir by that kind of injection?
Well, the potential damage, I believe, is spelled out in the bullet items in my conclusions, and the word likely, as I would use it, meaning it's more than a 50% chance of probability that would occur.
Right now, Goodnight has injection permission of injecting 15,000 barrels per day. And they have 4 wells injecting into the San Andres. They've asked for permission to increase the rate of injection in 2 of the wells, and they've also asked for an additional 4 wells or made applications for additional 4 wells, for saltwater disposal wells to inject at the same rates. So let's just figure that you multiply 15,000 times 8. And I'm not counting any of the requests for increase. And you can estimate that you're going to have about 100,000 barrels at least of injection into the San Andres Formation. Does that give you a much better idea as to the type of damage that would occur to the reservoir?
Well, the higher the injection volume, the higher the pressure, the more quickly the pressure will rise, and the sooner it will get to what we might call risky levels. And 120,000 barrels of water per day is a pretty high injection rate.
If you take a glass of water, and I'll take that as a reservoir, and you increase, and there's been some drawdown. I'm not saying that there isn't any drawdown from the water supply wells, but once you fill up that reservoir and you increase the pressures, where is that pressure and the volumes likely to go?
Well, water is largely incompressible, so when you inject those volumes of water, you will immediately start seeing an increase in pressure, and that basically increases the pressure in the entire San Andres reservoir, specifically the ROZ, if that's where the water's being injected.
When you say that there could be fracturing from increased pressure and water volumes, can you elaborate a little bit more of how, from a reservoir characteristics, how that pressure is going to manifest itself as far as going upstairs?
Well, as the pressure increases due to water disposal, eventually you will hit what we call the formation parting pressure, which will cause the reservoir rock to fracture. And when that occurs, then you lose control of where the water's going, and there's a good chance that some of that water, at least some of it, would go up into the Grayburg zone, and that would have a negative impact on the current water flood operations in the Grayburg. It could cause cycling of water to the producing wells and causing higher operating costs. It could reduce your sweep efficiencies because you're bypassing oil in the Grayburg water flood zone.
When you talk about higher operating costs, what do you mean by that?
Just literally the dollars per month it takes to keep a oil well producing, and that can be dependent upon the volume of water that you're having to move or lift to the surface along with the oil. The higher the volume of water, the higher the monthly operating cost.
Now, let's take that downstairs to the San Andres Formation. What happens there if you do have a ROS that should be developed in terms of economics?
Okay, are you asking me if fracturing occurs down there?
No, I'm not asking you that necessarily, but if fracturing will occur down there, what's your opinion as to whether fracturing would occur in the San Andres?
Objection. Mr. Merrick testified that he did not review, has no idea what the parting fracture pressure is for the San Andres. He's not evaluated. He has no basis to opine on that issue.
I'm asking him as a general proposition. I'm not asking him on any significant pressures and what the parting pressure is. I know he doesn't know what the parting pressure is. He's testifying according to his own self-affirming statement that fracturing will occur. I'm just trying to get him to elaborate a little bit more on that.
Well,
Overruled.
Okay, the formation parting pressure, the pressure at which the rock will fracture is, while I don't know the number exactly for this area, there are general numbers that do come into play. And if you were to cause hydraulic fracturing in the ROZ, then that could affect a future tertiary oil recovery project the same way it would affect the water flood. You could cause cycling of CO2 from an injector to a producer, bypassing the oil saturated intervals or some of the interval within the ROZ. That's one negative aspect of it. And then also injecting at the high rates, as we've discussed before, causes higher pressures, which will cause you to have to purchase more CO2 to conduct your tertiary project, and would be more costly.
Now, let's talk about waste. That was the subject that was brought up this morning. Suppose you have the injection rates that we just now talked about, 9 injection commercial wells that are, in my opinion, prolific injectors. how does that affect or create waste?
Well, the waste can come in the form of hydraulic fracturing causing some of the ROZ oil saturated interval to be bypassed because of the hydraulic fracturing. And then secondly, again, it's going to cause more CO2 to be required because of the higher pressure, which is costly and wasteful. I mean, and all of those two factors together would result in less ultimate oil recovery, which is, of course, a waste of resources.
So you're going to leave oil in the hole, right?
Yes.
Now, you were also asked about water supply wells. Does that make any difference here in terms of whether or not that water is being taken upstairs to the Grayburg and used as water flood?
Generally, no.
I mean, you stated something that those wells were not producing oil, but in a Ross, you typically wouldn't see oil necessarily in the wellbore, correct?
Correct. In the ROZ, you would not expect to be producing oil. Even though oil exists there, it's not movable oil.
You were also asked about, and I think that was from Dr. Ampoma. He asked you and referred to you, made reference to Mr. Buck Walters' testimony. And I'm not sure, but Mr. Buck Walter had a figure of 500 millidarcies, and you said that was very high, or you thought it was excessive.
I do believe that's very high for San Andreas, but I have not reviewed Dr. Buckwalter's work, and he may have been trying to prove a point with a high permeability to make a point that the real permeability is even lower, and that supports his conclusion. I'd just say that without having read his report, but I know the man.
You would have to read his report in order to really opine on anything that he said, correct?
That's correct.
I'm not trying to argue against Dr. Ampoma, but I'm just trying to clarify that aspect of his testimony, of Mr. Buckwalter's testimony. Do you find Mr. Buckwalter to be credible?
Generally, yes, very credible.
He's so smart, I don't understand him, actually, you know, just tell you the truth. But anyway, I mean, but going back to Darcy or millidarcies, that depends on rock type and reservoir characteristics, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you'd have to look at individual type of reservoir characteristics in order to really say what permeability or porosity factors are involved in evaluating an oil property, or
Yes.
in this case, a Ross.
Yes.
Okay. Ordinarily, however, when you have oil saturations in the 70% range, that would be a indication that you have movable oil, correct?
Generally, I would agree with that, yes.
And that you could produce that oil with primary production conventionally.
And with water flood, both.
In a Ross, however, you can't do a water flood, right? Or do primary production.
Well, you can't really do a water flood. I mean, you can do it, but it would not be successful.
You need CO2.
Yes.
Now, generally, Mr. Rankin tried to ask you about your lack of study on the reservoir characteristics, and you testified that you weren't giving that assignment, but let's take your 48 years of experience in reservoir engineering and evaluation of oil and gas properties. Does that count, your experience?
I would like to think so.
I don't want to tell you that maybe I don't understand your stuff if you got very much, if you had to do a study on oil in place. But if you did an oil and study play, you need a lot more time and a lot more information, given time limits and that sort of thing. Is that fair to say?
Yes, very fair.
Now, when Mr. Rankin took you through that series of emails, you never really agreed to do anything more than opine on the effect of saltwater injection into the San Andres Formation. Is that fair?
Yes.
So you never had a meeting of the minds as to what you were going to do in terms of doing further study other than what you wound up doing.
Correct.
One moment, Mr. Harwood. Not yet. I just said one moment, please. But I don't need any further time. I'm done. I don't have further questions. He may be excused.
Mr. Hearing Officer, please don't forget to turn on your microphone. We can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Thank you. All right, Mr. Merrick, thank you for your time, and you're free to go. You're excused.
Okay, thank you.
All right, on my list, I see Galen Dilwyn. Am I pronouncing that right? Is that your next witness, Empire folks?
Yes, that is our next witness, and Ms. Shaheen will present Mr. Dillowin's testimony.
Oh, okay, great. And is he appearing remotely?
Yes,
All right, great.
and he should be on.
Good afternoon, Mr. Dillon. Can you hear and see us?
Yes, I can.
All right. If you'll please raise your right hand, sir. You swear and affirm the testimony you give here today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury.
I do.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Shaheen.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Dillon. Could
Good
you
afternoon.
please state your name for the record?
My name is Galen Dillowin.
With whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm the Vice President of Business Development for New Tech Energy Alliance.
And you are testifying today as an expert in log analysis, is that right?
That is correct.
You've attached your credentials to your written testimony in this matter.
I have.
We would move that Mr. Dillowin's testimony today be accepted and his expertise as a log analysis be admitted into record.
Any objection from Goodnight?
Not to the admission of the record. When I deposed Mr. Dillon, he told me that he was seeking to be qualified as an expert in petrophysics. So I'm curious what the difference is between log analysis and petrophysics. But I can ask him that on cross. So I don't object to that general statement. But perhaps I'll ask him on cross the difference between log analysis and petrophysics.
Okay. My understanding is he's being tendered as an expert in the field of
Log analysis.
log analysis. You have any objection to that? You're going to reserve it for cross, Mr. Ray?
I think I'll reserve it for cross because when I deposed Mr. Dillowin, he told me he was seeking to be qualified as an expert in petrophysics.
Okay. All right. He'll be accepted as an expert in the field of log analysis.
Thank you. It's taken me a minute to be able to share here. If you just bear with me. Gonna have to drive. It's not even showing me. Mr. Dillowin, what did Empire first engage New Tech to do with respect to this matter?
Empire engaged us to analyze a series of logs to determine the characteristics that we see from them.
And were those wireline logs?
Yes, they were.
Can you explain to the commissioners what a wireline log is?
The wireline log is a series of data that's obtained at the time of drilling generally, where a series of tools that take electronic measurements are lowered downhole via means of a wireline or an electronic cable, and then a series of data points are obtained, placed against depth as the tool is removed from the hole.
And did you use wireline logs for 7 different wells?
Yes.
And what process did you use to look at those logs?
New Tech has a petrophysical process that we refer to as the new look.
You submitted direct written testimony explaining the results of that initial analysis as Empire's Exhibit F on August 26, 2024. Isn't that right?
Yes.
And did you submit revised testimony on December 4th, 2024 as revised Exhibit F?
Yes.
Why did you submit revised testimony?
After the initial submission, more data was made available to us on the EMSU 679 well, including core data that was on that well. And we analyzed that well and tied to the core, and then took that information and distributed it to the other wells in the area.
And did you also receive a study entitled Four County Appraisal of the San Andres Ross Fairway of the Permian Basin with information that you were asked to incorporate?
Yes.
And I am going to try to share that document. Is this the Four County Appraisal study that you used in your second analysis?
It is.
What changed in your revised testimony as a result of the refined analysis?
As we modified M and N values to match the core data in the analysis, it ultimately resulted in a lowering of oil in place in part of the logs.
And is it fair to say that the two analyses, the initial one that was discussed in your August testimony and the second analysis that you submitted in December, is it fair to say that those two analyses revealed a range of potential saturations?
Yes, it does.
The first analysis, does it represent the high end of the range?
It does.
And the second analysis, does it reflect the low end of the range?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm trying to share again. Oh. Let's try that again. Other than the revisions that were made in your revised Exhibit F, do you have additional changes to your initial Exhibit F?
No.
Do you have any changes to your revised Exhibit F?
No.
Subject to the revisions that were made in your revised Exhibit F, do you affirm that the statements made in your initial Exhibit F are correct and also and adopt that testimony today as your sworn testimony?
Yes.
And do you affirm that the statements made in your revised Exhibit F are correct and adopt that testimony as well as your sworn
Yeah.
testimony here today?
Yes.
Let's briefly walk through the process for your analysis.
Okay.
Can you describe the process that New Tech used that's reflected here in slide Exhibit F1?
Yes. The new look process is an 8-step process in which a well is analyzed. The first step is to look at the raw data and look at the validity of that data. From there, once the data is valid and has been edited and or normalized as necessary, then a series of steps is taken to evaluate the well to determine lithology, porosity, and permeability of the formation. And in the end, it is all ranked with a flag system.
And does this slide, is this a generic example of the output you get from the new look process?
Yes, it is.
Does this slide reflect information that is contained in your file testimony?
Yes, it does.
Let's walk through the steps in your analysis. What variables did you consider in your analysis?
In this analysis, after receiving the core data, we looked at the values of M and N on the saturation equation and varied those.
And how were the M and N values used in your initial analysis, scenario 1?
In the initial scenario, we ran a standard value of 2 and 2, which is very common in carbonate reservoirs.
And in scenario 2, what changed?
In scenario 2, and all of these scenarios are located within that 4-county study. The one that was on the Northwest Shelf in the Midland Basin showed an M value of 2.3 and an N value of 2.3. We found that it made a good match of core saturations from the top of the San Andres to down to 4,302 feet.
And when you say it was a good match, that means you matched it to the core saturations from the core data of the MSU 679, is that right?
That is correct.
And can you tell us what you used in scenario 3 for your analysis?
Scenario 3, the data sets that fell in the San Simon Channel to the north, an M value of 2.3 and an N value of 3.0 was run in those wells. When compared against the core water saturation, we found that core water saturation was 15% higher than values calculated using those numbers.
And for scenario 4, did you also use additional data from the 4-county appraisal?
Yes, these were 2 areas within Gaines County on the Central Basin Platform that yielded an M and N value of 2.3 and 3.4, which showed a match to the core water saturation in the bottom of the San Andres.
How did you apply this analysis to the other wells?
As no one value fit the entire analysis, we broke up the interval into 3 separate zones to which we applied modified values of M and N with using the study as the basis for those. And with that, we then took the values and applied them to the other wells in the area.
Were you provided with the core for the MSU 679 before your first analysis?
No, we were not.
Can you describe to the commissioners what is reflected here in Exhibit F6?
F6 is a graphical representation of the new look analysis as shown. On the left-hand side, you have the raw wireline data as presented to us. From the middle to the right is our analysis. We have lithological analysis showing that it is primarily a dolomite. This is the Grayberg section on top of the San Andres. We also show porosity with a hydrocarbon saturation in it marked in black. And then we have movable and bound water shown as part of that porosity, correct, right there. As well as permeability to the right of there where it shows a permeable formation.
And what is the important takeaway here?
In this, it shows that the reservoir has a hydrocarbon saturation, has the ability to flow a fluid through the permeability, and that there is water that will move with it also.
And this relates specifically to the log analysis for the MSU 673.
That
in
is
light
correct.
of the, okay, and that's in light of the scenario 4 analysis that you did using the 4-county appraisal. Is that right?
Scenario 5.
Scenario 5. And the next slide, is this a similar result for the San Andres section?
Yes, of the same well.
And what is the important takeaway here?
What this shows is the zone is also a dolomite predominantly. It has porosity, which shows both hydrocarbon and water saturations, as well as permeability in the reservoir.
Is your analysis explained in more detail in the attachment to your revised Exhibit F entitled Water Saturation Parameter Scenarios in Lee County for Empire?
Yes,
And it's my understanding that Empire's next witness, Mr. McShane, will provide further testimony regarding the results of new text analysis. Is that right?
yes,
Thank you. I would like to move for admission into the record both Exhibit F and revised Exhibit F.
Any objection, Mr. Rankin?
Nope.
OCD?
No objection from OCD, Mr. Hearing Officer.
Rice?
No objection.
Pilot?
No objection.
It'll be admitted.
I would also like to move for admission into the record the 4-county appraisal paper as Exhibit F8.
Mr. Rankin?
No objection.
Mr. Moander?
No objection.
Mr. Beck?
No objection.
Mr. Suazo?
No objection.
It'll be admitted as well.
Thank you. I pass the witness.
Okay, Mr. Rankin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Dillowin. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Mr. Rankin. Yourself?
I'm doing okay. Well, the first thing I want to address with you is what is the status of your testimony. Ms. Shaheen asked you, qualified you as an expert in log analysis, but when I deposed you and specifically asked you what you're seeking to be qualified as, you told me that you're seeking to be qualified as an expert in petrophysics. What's the difference, in your opinion, between petrophysics and log analysis?
The main difference is the inputs used, that a log analyst is a subset of petrophysics, where most of the time petrophysics is log interpretation. However, there can be other items that are introduced that would be in addition to what I have performed for Empire.
Okay, so like what?
Fluid flow within a reservoir.
So you did not evaluate fluid flow within a reservoir as part of your analysis for Empire?
No, I did not.
Okay, and you're saying that's something that goes outside of what a log analysis would be?
Correct.
Okay. What else differentiates an expert in log analysis from a petrophysics expert?
Mostly it's taking it to the reservoir engineering side of things. That is the predominant difference as I see it.
Okay. Now, when I asked you during your deposition what subject matter or field you were seeking to be qualified as an expert in, you told me petrophysics. Why is that changing today?
Just to be more specific as to what it is I do within the discipline of petrophysics.
Whose decision was that to amend your qualifications from petrophysics to log analysis?
I object to the characterization there. And also to the extent that he's seeking attorney-client communications. I would object as well.
Rephrase the question. It's a bit argumentative.
Okay. Did you decide to change your qualifications from petrophysics to an expert in log analysis?
Yes.
Okay. And how did that decision come about?
Same objection. Don't believe it's relevant to this proceeding.
Overruled.
In conversation, quite often as we talk about the analysis that we do at New Tech, we refer to it as log analysis versus just petrophysics to be that specific component of it. And that is why in that conversation, when asked if I had to choose one, which would it be? Sometimes it's not, like talking about things like Kleenex versus tissue, right? At some points, they're a little bit different, but overall, they can be quite the same to someone that isn't within the purview of the discipline.
Okay, so based on reassessment of what you actually did in your analysis, you have revised your expertise from being an expert in petrophysics to being an expert in log analysis. Is that fair?
Yes.
I'm going to object again because I think that's a mischaracterization of what occurred.
What I've got written down is log analysis is a subset of petrophysics. So I think we got the point. Maybe move on. All right.
Well, I guess I want to understand, Mr. Hearing Officer, because actually I feel like it's important to understand what Mr. Dillowin is qualified to testify about, because much of this case is about petrophysics. And in their direct case, their case in chief, this is the only witness that they have to testify about log analysis or petrophysics. They have nobody else. And without an analysis on petrophysics who's qualified, then they don't have any testimony that goes to establishing the basis for oil saturations. And I'm just trying to understand exactly what Mr. Dillowin is qualified to testify on.
Well, what he's qualified to testify about and how he decided to change his expertise, the name of his expertise are two different topics. So
Yeah.
You're welcome to explore the other one.
That's what I'm moving towards.
All right.
I wanted to understand the first, and now I'll ask the second. So, Mr. Dillowin, as to the question about what's entailed within the expertise of log analysis, okay? One of the things you told me, as I understand that's excluded from that, would be understanding or testifying on how fluid would flow within a reservoir. Agree?
Yes.
Okay. And I'd like to understand a little bit more about so that's what it doesn't include. And I'd like to understand a little bit more about what it does include. So in your analysis and your testimony, you have modified the M&N values for the logs that you interpreted, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I'd like to understand how an expert in log analysis has the expertise to determine what are the proper M&N values to apply for a given log.
When running for a general carbonate system, the values used within the saturation exponent generally are 2 and 2 for M and N respectively. In situations, those values can change depending on in light of the information given.
Okay, now as a log analyst, okay, what do you need to understand to determine what specific rock characteristics affect M&N?
The wettability of the rock, the cementation of the rock, as well as secondary porosity and some geological features such as fracturing, natural fracturing that is, and a secondary porosity in and of that.
Okay. So let's take the first one, cementation of the rock. Okay, as part of your analysis, I understand that you took values from this 4-county assessment and you applied those to your well logs, correct?
Yes.
And I may be taking this out of order a little bit, but I guess I want to understand my understanding based on, when I deposed you was that the process that New Tech took when it pulled those different values from the 4-county assessment was that you ran them, you ran them against your log, right? You put them down the log and you saw which ones fit best with the water saturation. Is that correct?
We saw which values of the core saturation fit as to the entire, as to the parameters run, yes.
And I guess I'm just talking about the 679 well, correct? Because
Correct.
the only well for which you had water saturations from the core was for the 679 well, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So in order to determine which M&N values were properly applied to the 679 well, it was a trial and error, basically, right? You took M&N and just applied it to the 679 to see which one resulted in the closest fit to the water saturation, correct?
We used the determinations from the 4-county study as a basis for wells within the same reservoir to see if those combinations fit, as there could be a very large number of combinations that could also fit those zones as you calculate them out.
Okay, but I guess you're limited yourself to those values from the 4-county study, but it was a trial and error to see which ones fit best across the 3 zones or intervals that you divided the 679 into, correct?
Object
No,
to the form of the question.
It's overruled.
You can answer, Mr. Dillowin.
No, we used those values to calculate as an entirety of the analysis and saw where in those that they fit. After we had a fit, we were asked what it would take to match core by varying M and N, which is when we came up with the scenario 5 values.
Okay. But I guess my point about this is I'm not hearing you tell me that you were evaluating the geologic components to determine what the cementation of rock is, what the secondary porosity is, what other features such as fractures may influence the M&N values. I hear you tell me that you basically were running M&N to decide which ones fit best with the water saturation, correct?
I am not a geologist. I am not able to make that study.
Okay. So did anybody do that at New Tech as part of this analysis?
That was outside the scope of what we were asked to do.
Okay. I'm going to come back to this because I think by going through, what you did in your analysis will help me better understand, and I'll be able to target more directly the questions I have. Okay. Have you, Mr. Dillowin, ever prepared a petrophysical analysis for a proposed residual oil zone development before?
I have not.
To your knowledge, has New Tech ever done so?
Yes.
Where?
In many fields across West Texas and eastern New Mexico for the San Andres.
Okay, which fields?
Fields such as Wasson, Slaughter, Seminole, Vacuum. Those are the first ones that come to mind.
Okay. The vacuum's on the northwest shelf north of the San Simon Channel, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Any that you can identify on the western margin or slope of the Central Basin Platform?
Not that I remember offhand.
Okay. So nothing that you can identify as you sit here today, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And were those that you have identified in the San Andres?
Sorry, repeat.
Were the ROZs that you referred to that New Tech had worked on in the San Andres?
Yes.
Okay, and those were on the eastern side of the Central Basin Platform or north of the Northwest Shelf, correct?
Predominantly.
Okay. But none that you can think of today west on the western side of the Central Basin Platform, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Exhibit F Ms. Shaheen reviewed with you your original testimony, which was marked as Exhibit F and filed in August of 2024. So you prepared that testimony, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And then in December of 2024, you submitted and filed a revised testimony, correct?
yes.
Okay. Now, in that revised testimony, I don't see anywhere in that testimony where you refer to your prior testimony as a low range. Did you intend to retain the prior testimony?
I'm sorry,
When
you broke up over your wording.
Did you intend, when you filed your revised testimony in December of 2024, did you intend to retain the testimony you provided previously in August 2024?
At that time, we submitted the modified values. And as anything in petrophysics, the analysis, it can and usually is a range.
Now, when you filed your revised testimony, you didn't submit any ranges, did you?
No,
Okay. It was filed as revised testimony, right?
to my knowledge, yes.
Okay. And in your revised testimony, you made no statements about the intent to retain the previous work you'd done and submitted in August 2024, did you?
I do not remember.
If you did, it would be in your revised testimony, correct?
That would make sense, yes.
Okay. Now, I think you did this a little bit, but I want to just go into more detail here. Why did you revise your testimony in December 2024?
Due to receiving the new information about the core on the 679 as well as the log data for that well.
Now, when you submitted your original testimony, Exhibit F, okay, and that new data that you received, what was it?
It was a spreadsheet with core values and readings with saturations, porosity, and permeability through most of the zone, as well as an LAS of the log data.
For which core, which log, which well?
For the EMSU 679.
On my screen, let me know when you can see it. I'm going to share your original testimony that was filed in August 2024. Let me know when you can see that.
I can see it.
Okay, now this is your self-affirmed statement. It's marked as Exhibit F, and I'll just scroll down. It's signed and dated August 20th, 24. See that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you submitted this original testimony, you testified that, and I'm looking at page 2 of your testimony, that NewTek utilized core data available in the area, including core results from the EMSU 679, right?
Yes, that's what it says.
But so you knew that there were core data for the 679, but you didn't actually have it, did you?
No,
What were you given instead?
we were given verbal ranges for what porosity and permeability were before doing our analysis.
Okay. And who gave you those ranges?
Nick Brissett, to my memory.
Who's Nick? Is that with somebody with
Previous
Empire?
geologist for Empire.
Okay. So Empire gave you those ranges. Did you ask to see the core?
At the time, no.
Did you ask to see the core subsequently? Or did Empire give you the core after seeing Goodnight's direct testimony?
After the first submission here, it was decided by Empire that us analyzing that well and including it would show our analysis and see if there was any changes to it.
Okay. So going back to the revisions here, the purpose for the revised statement was to incorporate that additional log, or rather core data that you were given from Empire that was previously available, but you didn't ask for it, correct?
We were not analyzing the 679 well, so no, I did not ask for it.
Okay. And isn't the 679 well the only well? Well, I guess there's two wells that potentially have San Andres, that have core in the San Andres. Agree?
To my knowledge, that is it.
Okay. Within the EMSU, one of those is the RRBL number 4, according to Empire, correct?
Yes.
And the other is the EMSU 679, correct?
Yes.
So the two wells for which you were aware that there was core data, you did not ask for as part of your analysis of the logs available to you, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So now, subsequent to Goodnight filing its testimony, Empire then gave you the actual core data for only one of those wells, right? The EMSU 679, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And in your revised testimony, you were asked by Empire to calibrate the 679 well log, your interpretation, to the core water saturations, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And Empire also asked you to then, based on that analysis, to prepare this revised testimony in December, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so based on the results from the analysis applied to the 679 well log analysis, Empire asked you to prepare a similar analysis for each of the other logs for which were available for the EMSU, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And those are what Mr. McShane relied on in his revised testimony, correct?
To my knowledge.
Okay. Now I have up here your revised testimony. I've highlighted in green what I understand to be the actual changes in the testimony, the new testimony that was revised. Okay, as far as testimony goes. Do you see my screen here?
Yes.
Okay. So I've highlighted in green what I identified as the change in your testimony. And the first two sentences at the top here on page 5 are that, quote, in the exhibit, the water saturation reaches as low as 35%, indicating a hydrocarbon saturation of 65%. And the oil saturation varies from 65% down to 1% wherever porosity develops in the reservoir. Did I say that correctly?
Yes.
And was that a new sentence that was added in your revised testimony?
Yes.
Okay. And originally you stated that water saturation was as low as 20% with a hydrocarbon saturation of 80%. Agree?
If that's what it says, then yes.
Okay. But in this revised testimony, you didn't retain that earlier analysis as part of your testimony, did you?
No, because as you see stated here is in exhibit F7. I was referencing the exhibit F7 attached here, which was different than the one in the initial.
So is revised, I'm just confused because did revised F7 not replace the original F7?
Yes, that's why it is both referred to as exhibit F7.
Okay. The next sentence I identified as being new here is the M&N values were adjusted for this updated analysis with additional discussion in attachment 1 at the end of this document. Did I read that correctly?
Yes,
And are those the three sentences in your testimony that are different from your original testimony?
as I remember, yes.
Okay, nothing else was changed in your testimony other than those sentences that I've highlighted in green?
Correct.
Okay. Then here in this last sentence I highlighted in green, you refer to attachment 1 at the end of this document. And by referring to that, you would agree that you're incorporating that analysis and its statements as part of your testimony. Agree?
Yes,
Okay. Now, going back to the statement in your original testimony that you referred to the 679 in your original testimony, that that the new tech utilized core data available in the area, including the core results from the EMSU 679. And just to be clear, Empire at the time of your original testimony in August of 24 did not ask NewTek to calibrate its log interpretations to the EMSU 69 as part of your original testimony, correct?
to the EMSU 679.
Correct?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. And it didn't ask you to do to calibrate your interpretations or analysis to the RR Bell number 4, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And Empire also did not provide you the core or log information on the RR Bell 4, correct?
Correct.
Nor did they provide you the actual core data from the EMSU 679, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I mean, Mr. Dillman, how long have you been doing log analysis for NewTek?
For 16 years.
Isn't it advisable when doing log analysis to calibrate your log interpretations to core data whenever that information is available?
Yes, it is highly recommended.
Why didn't you do that in your first analysis?
Given the analysis that NewTek had done in the area, Empire decided based off of cost to not have us analyze those wells, as there were other wells of immediate concern to what they were trying to accomplish.
Okay. That's your understanding based on your discussions or interactions with Empire, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, even in your revised testimony, you did not calibrate your analysis to the RR Bell number 4 core data, correct?
It was part of the system that it is in our system that has made up the overall San Andres model, but there was no direct input past that in this area. All of the data was tied to for saturation for the revised testimony in the 679 well.
Okay. Now, when I saw it from discovery, because I understood based on your deposition that the RR Bell number 4 core data was part of the analysis, was incorporated into NewTek's new look analysis. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay. And so it informed to some extent NewTek's assessment or analysis of the well logs in the EMSU, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And when I sought from Empire to obtain the RR Bell number 4, they objected to my request for that document. And my understanding is you did not provide it to Empire. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And why was that?
That was due to the RR Bell number 4 core was not provided to us by Empire, was provided to us by another operator, and therefore I do not have the rights to share that information.
Okay, but it was used in your analysis, correct?
Yes.
Um, Now, you touched briefly on Newtek's new look process with Ms. Shaheen. And basically gave us a high level statement that it's an eight-step process. It's called the new look process. We talked about this in your deposition, but and you mentioned just now that the first step is to validate the data. Explain to me how it is that you validate the data and what data are you validating?
We are looking at the raw wireline data. We are looking at the inputs that will go into the model, the curves generated based off of the tools that were run on each well.
How do you validate the raw wireline data?
One of the things we do will be create histograms of data to ensure the similar data ranges. One will be to look at whole washout, or what we refer to as bad hole, to areas where the density data is not valid. Those are the primary methods, either through normalization or through editing.
When you say editing, you mean like excluding data that is anomalous?
Or changing the data to be based off of the other curves, to literally hand edit the data.
Okay. And was that done in this case for any of these wells that you analyzed within the EMSU?
I do not remember.
Is that something that you yourself did or somebody else at Newtek would have done?
That would have been done by one of our analysts.
Okay. But you sitting here, you don't know whether or to what extent any of the data from the raw wireline logs were edited or changed by Newtek's technicians.
It's indicated on the log display.
Okay, so how is it indicated on the log displays?
There is a red shading to show where that does occur, that's located within the depth track.
Okay, are you aware of any as you sit here today that reflect that red shading that you can point me to, or no?
If you look at my exhibit F6 and F7, that should be below this. In F6, you will see no red shading in the depth track, showing that there were no edits to that data.
Okay.
Within the zone. And if you proceed to the F7, there are also no edits within this zone.
So I'd have to look at the complete well image, the complete interpreted log image to determine whether or not there's any shading, red shading indicative of log edits, correct?
Yes.
Okay. But as you sit here today, you're not aware of whether that's the case for any of the wells that Newtek has analyzed, correct?
Correct.
And you don't know, so therefore you don't know to what extent Newtek in its validation efforts had to or decided it needed to modify or edit any of the raw wireline data, correct?
From the top of my head, I cannot recall it. However, it would be able to be looked at and determined quickly.
Okay. Now, does the new look process use synthetic nuclear magnetic resonance in its analysis?
Define synthetic nuclear magnetic resonance.
I'm asking you, I mean, does new look process use, let me ask you this, does it use a nuclear magnetic resonance in its process?
No, it does not.
Okay. Does it use a neural net or some sort of machine learning? Did you hear that
It is-
question, Mr.? Yeah, sorry,
Yes,
go
I
ahead.
heard you. I am just considering all aspects of it. In and as much that when we determine irreducible water, you will see on the third step that we use a multiple modeling logic that ties back to our relationships from which we derive from nuclear magnetic resonance.
I think I might need you to rephrase that because I'm not sure I followed you. Can you explain again what you mean?
So using multiple modeling logic, meaning multiple inputs that are not necessarily tied together to determine irreducible water, which is derived from a relationship that we know from magnetic resonance theory to tie and understand irreducible water.
Okay. So to the extent there is any sort of neural net or machine learning, it's that process is related solely to the determination of irreducible water. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that same process was used for the new text revised log analysis, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I'm going to skip down to the attachment 1 where you get into the amendment here that you did. Okay, this is on PDF page 16 of your revised testimony. This is your attachment that includes your revised analysis, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So based on my understanding, Mr. Dillowin, NewTek received the EMSU 679 core data and logs from Empire in September of 2024, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And what exactly did Empire ask you to do with that data?
We were asked to analyze the 679 well, plot core against it, and then to determine what values of M and N based from the 4-county appraisal could apply within there, and then ultimately make a tie directly to core saturation as provided.
Okay. In this page I've got up on the screen here, which is not numbered, but under the number 1 of the scope of the project, the last portion of the sentence here says that you were asked to apply these M and N values to the 679 well, and then provide commentary on implication of the values. Do you see that?
Yes.
What does that mean to provide commentary on implication of the values?
What does it mean by the values changing in regards to the data?
Okay. What does it mean in regards to the values of M and N changing with respect to the data? Is that's what you said?
Yes.
And I guess I'm trying to understand what do you mean by that? Like, does the data reflect? Can you find a basis for changing M and N values in the data? Is that what you're saying?
As well as why would those values not be a standard number? Why would they not be 2 and 2?
Okay. Okay. Now, in the introduction here, I've highlighted a section of your statement here that says determining water saturation was one of the multiple rock properties delivered by NewTek's new look to Empire to provide the best petrophysical solution of the San Anderson Graybrook formations of the EMSU 679 well in Lee County. Why evaluate, why tie the log analysis to the water saturation in the core?
That's what was asked of us.
Okay. Do you understand why that was asked of you?
Because to my knowledge, that was the only water saturation values in the area.
Okay. And generally, just so I'm tracking with you, when there's a high water saturation in the core, that would indicate a low oil saturation, correct?
Yes, those two work together hand in hand.
Right. And so the lower the water saturation, the higher the oil saturation, correct?
Yes,
Okay. Now, in a core though, right, there's not just water saturation, there would be oil saturation, true?
not always.
What was that, Mr. Dillman? I didn't hear you.
Sorry, I said not always.
Not always. In this particular core, was there oil saturation values?
There were.
But you were directed to match to the water saturations, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in this next sentence that I've highlighted here, you explain that the 4 sets of M&N values that you used in this study were chosen based off of this 4-county paper that we talked about, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and this is I think a map that shows where or how that 4-county area was partitioned into different M&N values, correct?
Yes.
So there was, I think each of these, like partition 1's up here in the Northwest Shelf, partition 2's down here through the San Simon Channel, partition 3's on the Central Basin Platform, partition 5's over the Midland Basin, and partition 4's in the Central Basin Platform, correct?
Yes.
And so notwithstanding the fact that these 4-county values were from different discrete regions across the Permian Basin, you used all those values against the 679 well, correct?
Yes.
And in this 4-county study, these M&N values didn't vary with depth, did they?
No.
Okay. And just going back just to confirm, so the purpose of this sensitivity analysis or the study that we're reviewing right now was to calibrate NewTek's log analysis to the water saturation measured in the EMSU 679 core, correct?
Yes.
And once you got that log analysis calibrated to the core water saturations, then the idea would be that you would have some confidence in NewTek's interpretation or log-derived interpretation of oil saturations, correct?
Yes.
Because as you said, there's a relationship between water saturation and oil saturation, right?
Yes.
Okay. And that calibration using water saturation was done at Empire's request.
Yes.
Not to calibrate it on the oil saturations, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, I think I understand how you got to the M&N values in the 679 core, right? I think my understanding is that you applied all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those M&N values to the entire core interval, and you look to see which best fit the water saturation, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then, and you divided the 679 into 3 depth intervals, correct?
That was what it showed to do, that no one parameter would solve the entire interval.
Okay. But you chose only 3 intervals. Why only 3? Why not 10 or 15 or more?
Because 3 intervals got the job done.
Okay. Now, we're talking about the 679 well, right?
Yes,
Okay. Now, once you got M&N values that match the water saturations in the 679 core, then you had to take those M&N values and figure out how to apply them to each of the other wells in the EMSU that you analyzed for which you didn't have core, correct?
yes.
Okay. Now, how did you do that?
We looked at each of the other wells and looked at where the changes were made in the 679 well and correlated them across and made the changes accordingly.
Okay. Okay. So you did it based on and so was it based on a log correlation, a depth correlation? What were you finding? What were you correlating in the well logs to mark the change in the M&N value?
A log correlation.
A log correlation. Okay. Okay. And so were you able to see some log characteristic that to you indicated a change in the M&N value?
Under my direction, this work was performed by Harry Hernandez. And he was the one that made the tie to each of the wells.
So when I discussed this with you during your deposition, you told me the same thing. And you told me at the time, if you recall, Mr. Dillowin, that you were not able to identify any log characteristics that indicated a change in M&N value. Agree?
Correct.
And since that time, have you had a chance to talk to Mr. Hernandez to understand his basis for identifying a change in the logs that correlated to an M&N value?
No, I have not.
Okay. But you didn't do that yourself, right?
Correct.
And and as you sit here today, you remain unable to identify any log characteristics that reflect in your mind justification for changing the M&N values in any of these logs that you analyzed in your revised testimony, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So when I asked you during your deposition whether when you stood before the commission and you were asked which of the two analyses you would stand behind, which you thought was more correct, the initial analysis that you'd done or the revised analysis that you'd done, you told me that New Tech stood behind the original analysis. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And as you sit here today, is there any have you changed your opinion on that?
Both of the analysis as run with the numbers are correct. There are many issues when you tie into a core like we did, in which we have values given to us. Based off of that, and based off of the other inputs that can be changed within the saturation component, there are other components that could affect saturation to as equal of a value as what we see here. Given the fact that this is the only core in the area, by validating it back, this gives us an opportunity to look at this well and try to calculate those values down.
Yeah, I'm not sure I quite followed it, but let me back up to what I think the first part of your answer to my question, and you told me just now that in your opinion that both analyses or interpretations are correct, and I'm trying to square that where. Let me pull up my screen. One second. where we have, upwards of a 80% or more difference in oil in place calculations resulting from your oil saturation interpretations. That's a big difference. And you're telling us that they're both correct. Correct?
They are a range, yes, sir.
A range. Okay. So in one moment, let me get to this. You may or may not have been listening to my discussion with Mr. Merrick, but I did review with him the analysis that Empire conducted on the Rhino SWD that NewTek analyzed. And based on NewTek's analysis of the Rhino, in the original NewTek analysis, Empire calculated an oil in place value of 91.5 million barrels per section. In the revised analysis, NewTek calculated a oil in place value of 15.6 million barrels per section. And based on my calculation, that's a more than an 82% decrease in oil in place. And that is a big range. And you're telling me that both interpretations are correct based on the input values provided. Is that correct?
Yes, they are both valid calculations.
But the commission is sitting here trying to decide today or tomorrow or at the end of this hearing whether there's actually any oil down here. And when I asked you in your deposition, which in your opinion, Mr. Dillowin, was the more correct interpretation of reality based on your experience, you told me that that NewTek stood by the original analysis.
Yes,
Between
sir.
the two interpretations that you have done, Mr. Dillowin, which in your opinion is more correct and more reflective of actual conditions in the reservoir?
They are both a range, like I've said. In doing the analysis initially with the value of 2 and 2, which is the standard in a multi-mineral approach, and getting this is the optimistic case. The other run is the pessimistic case of what we're looking at here. In that case, more data is needed to determine the actual in-place volumes of this well.
Okay, so now in your revised self-affirmed testimony, you didn't testify that your original analysis was the low end and your new analysis was the high end, did you?
The other way around.
Let me rephrase. In your revised testimony, you didn't say that your original testimony was the high end and the revised testimony was the low end, did you?
No.
Okay. Now, when I asked you that question during your deposition, you gave me an answer and you told me that you believe your original analysis was more correct. What has changed between when I asked you that question in your deposition and today?
As with anything, all data sets are what's the word I'm looking for? It is incomplete. In the case here where we did not obtain the data as it was being done, therefore assumptions are to be made. When you look at those assumptions and calculate them out, there are several of these that offset each other. Using the 4-county paper, using the core on the 679 well, shows that the variability of M and N across an area can be quite great. Therefore, if you look at our analysis of it and you look at the way we tied to that core, that if M and N are changed as we put forth in scenario 5, then the revised scenario, being the pessimistic case, accurately represents the 679 well as the core was obtained.
I didn't see where in your revised testimony is scenario 5.
It was in my exhibit.
What exhibit?
Right. Sorry, in the bottom here of on oh sorry, I don't know what page is the second one up from the one page up from this one. Where it says scenario 5, what it takes to match core SW.
Okay. So here in this scenario 5, you say to make core water saturation and derived water saturation in agreement, a variable M and N must be used. And then you go on to say, quote, which is an unlikely scenario because there is no change in logs character through Grayburg and San Andreas formations, period. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. So as you sit here today, are you changing your testimony that it's an unlikely scenario because there's no change in logs character through the Grayburg and San Andreas formations?
No.
Okay. Is it common for New Tech in its work and log analysis to calibrate its log interpretations to water saturation in core?
At times we do.
When have you done that?
One is when we look at the analysis and if we get the values. I mean, when we're working from core, like I said, the data sets are not always perfect. Therefore, we do not always get saturation values. So we can't tie to it if we do not have it. And if we do have it, understanding how the core was analyzed becomes important to being able to tie to saturation values, as well as when was the core analyzed in time to obtaining the core, or when we call the core was cut.
All right. But that wasn't my question, I guess. Okay. I'm going to get to that because I don't disagree that it's important to understand those things. But my question to you is, you answered me when I asked you, is it common for New Tech to calibrate its log interpretations to water saturations? And you said sometimes. And I'm asking you when. When have you done that? And what circumstances have you calibrated to water?
We have done it in many, many different formations in many different areas, generally in conventional reservoirs.
Have you ever done it in a residual oil zone?
I do not remember.
In this revised analysis where you're calibrating to the water saturation measurements in the EMSU 679 core, did you make any corrections for water loss during the coring process?
No,
You just told me that it's important to understand how the core was analyzed, right?
yes,
Why is it important to understand how the core was analyzed?
because depending on how the core was handled can change your saturation values.
Right, because you would expect when you bring core up from depth that there's going to be some gas expansion, correct?
Depending on how it was handled.
Right, depending on what kind of core it was, correct?
Yes,
And as gas expands, what happens to water in the core?
as gas expands, both water and hydrocarbon can leave the sample.
Okay, what did you do to assess what and how this core was handled before you analyzed?
We just received a table with those values in them. We did nothing. We plotted saturation of the water against the log derived.
Okay, but you just told me that it's important to understand how the core was handled, correct?
Correct.
But did you do that here?
We were not given how the core was handled.
Did you ask for it? I mean, you told me it's important to understand how the core is handled in order to do an analysis of a log interpretation. And you explained to me how when the core is removed from depth, gas will expand and can express the water from the core, altering the water saturations, right?
It can, yes.
And you don't know whether it did or didn't here, right?
Correct.
And this was a conventional core, correct?
Yes.
So is there anything that would have been any aspect of that process that would have preserved water saturations during the coring process?
I'm not a coring expert.
Okay, so you don't know.
No, sir.
Okay. All right, so you didn't do that to determine what may have happened or how the core was handled, and you didn't make any corrections to the water saturations prior to your analysis, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Why not?
Because I don't know how to, I personally do not know how to make those corrections.
And is that because you're a log expert in log analysis and not an expert in petrophysics?
Because I'm not an expert in core handling.
Okay. But that involves understanding the fluid flow in the reservoir, right? Understand what happens to the core.
That makes logical sense, yes.
Okay. And that's outside of the scope of your expertise, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So when just stepping through this, if there were loss of water saturation from the core, right? It's a conventional core. And if there were loss of water due to expansion of gas as the core is removed from depth, you and I discussed previously that as water saturations decrease, the interpretation is that there's a higher oil saturation, correct?
Yes.
So if you don't make any corrections for loss of water during the coring process, isn't that going to artificially lower the measured water saturations in the core?
As you state, with gas expansion and removing water, with the gas expanding, wouldn't that also cause hydrocarbon saturation to go down?
Well, I guess I get to ask the questions, but Mr. Dillon, are you aware that Empire's position is that the RZ, the oil in the RZ is immobile?
No,
Okay. Now, if the water saturations decrease in the core, the analysis would result in higher oil saturations, correct?
yes, as those two are hand in hand.
Okay. And so if you fail to make corrections for water saturations, your analysis would generate higher oil saturations, wouldn't they?
To a point, if you look at the core data, it does go to 100% water saturation.
In certain places, is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Okay. And in those areas where you measured 100% water, you're saying that there wouldn't be any oil, correct?
correct.
But in every other interval where there's less than 100% water, then there would be oil, correct?
But if the oil can't flow and you have 100% water saturation, then there is 0% oil saturation. For that to be true, if the oil is not flowing in and of itself, then the other values relative to it would have to be similarly correct.
I'm not sure I quite followed the logic there. But you're getting into discussing whether something would flow or not, correct?
Talk about,
I'm sorry, what?
you mentioned that the water would come out with gas expansion, which I agreed to.
Hmm.
And if water saturation is at 100%, yet the oil in the system is also immobile, then you can't make the conclusion that 100% water saturation shows that there should be hydrocarbon saturation in lieu of 100% water saturation.
Not sure I'm tracking, but that's your response to my question is that what you just restated?
Yes,
Okay. Now, in addition to not taking into account any corrections for water, loss of water during coring, did NewTek take into account production test data that was publicly available in its interpretation of the EMSU well logs in either your original or revised testimony?
no,
Did Empire did not provide NewTek any of the well test data, swab tests, water production tests, or any other data with respect to any of the wells that NewTek analyzed? Is that correct?
correct,
Correct. Is that what you said?
correct, yes.
Yep. And NewTek did not itself review any of the public well files for well test data on the wells you analyzed, correct?
Correct,
Okay. And Empire didn't give you any information on the perforations in the wells that you analyzed, what depths they were perforated, correct?
correct, to my knowledge.
Okay. And NewTek did not ask for any other information from Empire to conduct its analysis, correct? Other than what Empire gave you.
Correct,
And the only information that Empire gave you, other than the core and log data for the EMSU 679 well, were the raster images for the wells you interpreted, correct?
yes, correct.
And at the time you prepared both your original and your revised testimony, you were aware that the EMSU has been operated as a water flood since 1986, correct?
Yes,
And you were aware at the time, were you aware at the time of your original or revised testimony that the EMSU had 6 water supply wells that were drilled inside the EMSU?
I was not aware of the number, just that there were water supply wells.
Okay, but you didn't know where they were located or what formation they were completed in?
No,
So you weren't aware that they were producing and completed in the San Andres formation in the EMSU?
I was not aware, no.
And you're not aware that Empire calculates those water supply wells have produced about 380 million barrels of water with no reported oil?
As stated before, we received no production information like that, so no.
Okay. Did NewTek take into account any of the water production history of these 6 water supply wells in either its original or revised testimony?
No,
And NewTek also did not take into account any of the well production history, oil, gas, or water, as part of its log interpretation in either the original or revised testimony?
no,
And NewTek didn't review any mud logs or drilling reports for any of the wells that were analyzed in its analysis?
no.
Um, so one of the questions I have about the way NewTek did its M&N sensitivity analysis in the revised testimony, you applied a changing M&N value only to the San Andres. Is that correct?
Correct. As the core showed the Grayberg to be in adherence to the model.
Okay, so you made no changes to the M&N in the Grayberg because you were able to match, or rather, NewTek's original analysis matched the core to start with in the Grayberg?
Correct.
Okay. So, but as to the San Andres, my recollection is, Mr. Dillowin, that the issues with the matching the core in the 679 were only in the bottom portion of that interval. Isn't that correct?
If you note, as it says here, that from 4158, which is what I remember to be the top of the San Andres, sorry, from 4158 to 4303, a value of 2.15 and 3 made the best fit. And then below that to TD, an M of 2.4 and an N of 3.4 was applied.
Okay, but did you vary the M&N values in the San Andres, the entire San Andres, correct?
Yes,
Okay, but wasn't it true that the NewTek's analysis, well, okay, so you applied the variable M&N to the entire interval of the San Andres in the 679, correct?
yes, as stated in
Okay.
here.
Now, did NewTek prepare or conduct any sort of uncertainty analysis on its initial log interpretations?
No,
How about for its revised analysis?
the revised analysis in and of itself is a sensitivity.
Okay. Did you try running your revised model against any other San Andres core or log to confirm whether it was able to match?
No,
Yeah.
You tend to lose track of time. I've been in your seat before, but we've been going for a couple of hours. So why don't we if this is a good time for you, why don't we take a mid-afternoon break?
Works for me.
All right, let's see. So it's 3:15. Let's come back at 3:30. Okay, thanks. Okay, folks, 3:30. I see Ms. Tejas has rested her fingers. So are we back on the record, Ms. Apodaca?
Yes, we are.
All right, Mr. Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Dillon. Just have another short category of questions to ask you about. Are you aware that Empire retained a group called OPS Geologic to prepare a revised petrophysical model?
Yes.
Have you reviewed OPS's testimony?
No.
Have you reviewed their analysis of their logs that they interpreted?
No.
Did anyone at OPS reach out to talk to you?
No.
Did Empire ask you to review their testimony?
No.
Did Empire ask you to review their log interpretations?
No.
One moment, Mr. Dillman, just before I let you go, I'm going to confirm I have no further questions. Mr. Dillman, thank you. Mr. Hearing Officer, I have no further questions of the witness.
Thank you, Mr. Rankin. Mr. Moander, questions for Mr. Dillon?
Yes, Mr. Hearing Officer, just a couple. Good afternoon, Mr. Dillon. How are you doing today? Aside from being cross-examined, that is.
Highlight of my day.
These should be fairly straightforward. So you recall you were deposed on December 17th, 2024 in these matters?
Yes.
And at that time, you testified that you hadn't reviewed any of OCD's filings in any of the cases. Is that right?
Correct.
Have you reviewed them since?
No.
And would it be fair then, since you just testified you haven't reviewed OCD's records in any of these cases, that you don't have an opinion on OCD's case?
Correct.
Thank you. I'll pass the witness.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Moander. Mr. Beck, questions on behalf of Rice?
Mr. Dillon, I just have a couple questions for you. I want to make sure I understood what Mr. Rankin was asking you about. In your deposition with him in December of 2024, your testimony was that you stood by your original analysis and that you did not stand by the revised analysis. Was that right?
Yes.
And today, I think you said something different, which is today you're saying that the revised analysis is I think you said it's a low range or a low end range, and the original analysis is a high end range. Is that right?
Correct.
So today you're standing by both your original and your revised statements?
They are both possibilities. Yes.
And then today you were accepted as an expert in log analysis. Is that right?
Yes.
And on December 17th, 2024, you said that you expected to be accepted as a petrophysicist expert. Is that right?
Yes.
And since December 17th, 2024, you said you have not looked at any of the rebuttal statements from Ops Geologic, right?
Correct.
Have you spoken with the attorneys for Empire since December 17th, 2024?
Yes.
How many times?
don't remember an exact, handful of times.
Did you talk about the change in your testimony about the low end and high end ranges as opposed to not standing by your revised testimony?
Mr. Examiner, I'm going to object. I feel like he's broaching on attorney-client privilege here and work product.
And I'm happy to answer that. I think we've resolved this issue. The commission resolved it, finding that experts engaged are not subject to the attorney-client privilege. And I think they gave, based on that ruling, they gave the OCD the ability to depose, again, a witness where we had this objection before. So I think we've tread this ground.
I don't recall that ground having been tread or a ruling having been made. Maybe you could be more specific, Mr. Beck?
Sure. Let me find that. Find it really quickly. January. So February 6, 2025, the commission granted the the Oil Conservation Division's motion to compel expert witness testimony of Dr. Robert Lindsay. And let me find exactly where it is here.
Yes.
So paragraph 4 says Empire's objection to the discovery communications between its counsel and Dr. Lindsay on grounds of attorney-client privilege, i.e. that Dr. Lindsay has personally retained the Padilla law firm as his lawyers in this case, were not argued or otherwise supported in Empire's briefing and are thus deemed not meritorious. And so if we tread back on that, what happened was Mr. Padilla objected to the OCD's questioning of communications that Mr. Padilla had with Dr. Lindsay on grounds of attorney-client privilege or work product doctrine. The commission looked at the issue and correctly decided that there is no attorney-client privilege or work product protections for expert witnesses who would testify at this commission hearing.
Unless the witness themselves are a client of the party.
Then it would
Right.
then it would be more complex.
Okay.
It would depend on the nature of those communications.
And you're not, Empire isn't claiming that Mr. Dillon is a client.
That is correct. Though not to beat a dead horse, I believe that the definition of work product is any product conducted by someone at the direction of an attorney in anticipation of litigation, which is exactly what we're talking about here. I don't know that that analysis was done with respect to work product in that previous ruling, but I can agree that if Mr. Dillon is not a client, this is not an attorney-client communication, although the client was present at the time. So there was privilege between the client and the attorney at that time. But work product done at the direction of an attorney in anticipation of litigation by any person on behalf of the client is protected unless there's a need for that. And I forget what the standard is, but it's, there needs to be good cause effectively to get that information.
Okay, well, I'm not convinced that communications are work products, so I'm going to allow the question. That's objection is noted but overruled. You want to repeat it? It's been a while. I don't remember it. Mr. Dillon probably needs to hear it again.
Sure. I don't remember exactly what I asked. Ms. Tejas, can you read back my question, please?
Did you talk about the change in your testimony about the low end and high end ranges as opposed to notwithstanding your revised testimony?
Yes.
That's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Pilot, questions for Mr. Dillon.
Pilot has no questions for this witness.
All right, then to the commission, who wants to go first? Pardon? Sure. Mr. Rosatos, do you have questions?
I do not have questions. Thank you.
Okay, then Mr. Lamkin.
Yeah, good afternoon, Mr. Dillon. Thanks for your testimony. I have one question. In your experience analyzing logs and doing petrophysical analysis for clients in the past, have you ever come across situations where core data kind of confounds the log analysis and or empirical data from the field?
Yes.
Can you expand on what kind of interplay would cause conflicting outcomes?
There's numerous situations in the work I've approached, being that I've worked in almost every basin in the world. That situation being the case that when geology is changing, the fact that a core measurement is from a specific point versus wireline logs being an average over a depth of investigation, you can quite often see differences there, as well as sometimes core in the manner in which it was handled and timing between when it was taken, depending on how it was stored, how it was handled, things like that can cause differences in saturation values. And depending on the core information measured from those samples can also change how we look at things. But quite often it's a resolution issue.
Thank you. That's my only question.
Dr. Mpoma.
Good afternoon, sir. Thank you for your testimony. I do have a couple of questions for you. So you've been, accepted as an expert, well logging, petrophysics. So my first question to you is, based on your expertise and all the information that you've provided to the commission, how do you quantify the low and high end of your saturation calculations?
In looking at the analysis, the value of 2 and 2 on the high end is a standard log analysis approach for a multi-mineral model using the values looking that were placed in there. When running the low case, tying to the core here in this situation, we were using only those 2 values to tie. When you look at the results, you can see that core porosity was very accurate to the analyzed measurement, which holds one of the variables within saturation as known. And therefore, we are limited in the variables that we can change. However, M and N are not the only variables that can change in the saturation equation.
Okay, Thank you. So it sounds to me that your testimony is more or less aligned with Mr. Scott. Beckhead also more or less assigned the low and then the high end based on the standard and also the core calibrated data. Are you familiar with his testimony?
No, I'm not.
So you are not able to speak to how your M&N values differ from Mr. Scott Beckhead's testimony?
No, I'm not.
Now, you estimated your saturation values to be between 1% to 65%. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that's what it said. Yes.
So with a reservoir of about 65% saturation, more or less about, let's say 50%, even to the high end of 65% saturation, will this reservoir still be classified as an ROZ?
It is outside my purview to determine an ROZ, as that is not what we do in log analysis.
So you are not testifying that there is a presence of oil in this zone that we're talking about?
I am testifying that we do see hydrocarbon saturation in this reservoir. However, we do not determine an ROZ, as those characteristics are outside our purview.
So there's nowhere in your testimony that you made mention of ROZ?
Only in general terms.
Okay, so I'm asking you in general terms, do you believe that a reservoir of a saturation of about 65% can be classified as an ROZ or a conventional reservoir?
Depending on porosity.
Explain that to me, sir.
As porosity is one of the largest inputs into the saturation equation, depending on your porosity, therefore changes what your saturations are at that particular point.
Now, in your log analysis, I've seen that you are showing movable oil, movable water in there. So it sounds to me that based on your analysis, you are familiar with irreducible water saturation. Would that be a fair statement?
Yes.
Then what is the irreducible oil saturation that you estimated?
We did not estimate an irreducible oil saturation.
As part of your analysis, did you also evaluate how the changes in mineralogy can also impact, let's say, the porosity and then the saturation estimation?
By mineralogy, meaning lithology, yes, sir.
When I say mineralogy, I'm not necessarily saying limestone or, let's say, dolomite. I'm talking about the actual mineral composition of the rock metrics.
No, as we did not have that information going in, I could not make a mineralogical model. Therefore, a lithological one was determined.
Then my question to you is that, can you explain to the commission the geological basis of your potential changes in M and N, to convince the commission? Right now, as I speak to you now, I'm just trying to figure out which of your estimates should we take. And then if we talk about Mr. Ryan Bailey's estimation that was provided to the commission, which I'll come to that, Scott also did some work. Now, as a commissioner, I'm just trying to figure out which one should I work with?
Yes, sir. I'm well aware that If you want to have an argument about a geological model, put 3 different geologists in the same room and you'll get 4 different results. So in this situation here, as we ran it, because there is no way from the logs directly to measure the mineralogical model, therefore it was not determined to be done. We looked at it lithologically to validate the density porosity, and as you can see, the density or the porosity that is obtained within the core of the 679 well is accurate. Therefore, in applying it across, not being able to determine those differences in the geological models, that is why we are sticking with our initial assessment of 2 and 2. If we had direct measurements of the mineralogical model changing, then we could make some of those assessments and make those changes across to the model.
Go ahead, sir.
Using the core values of the saturation as provided to us in the 679 well and tying that to the calculation to determine M and N and to look at it in proximity to the data that we were provided and using that as the basis and seeing from the 4-county study the wide variance in M and N values from the different fields in the area, if you will, then there is a lot of values that can be used to obtain many different results in there.
So is it your testimony that there is no actual geological basis with regards to, let's say, how the optimum M and N more or less were derived, but just trying to fit that to the data? Is that a fair statement?
We were only fitting it to the data provided, we were not asked to create a geological model from it.
From your experience, are you able to analyze the impact of, let's say, saltwater injection on petrophysical analysis?
Not only given data at the time of original logging.
So explain that to me. So explain to the commission, how can we, or let's say, how can you estimate the impact of the water injection on, let's say, the petrophysical analysis?
Petrophysics or log analysis as we performed on these wells is a snapshot in time of when the data is obtained. Those conditions are only at that particular date on which it is run. If something causes the reservoir to change after that fact and no more data is obtained from that, then through petrophysics, no further insight could be viewed. Other data could be obtained and other disciplines can create models based off of that framework to show whether fluids have moved or have not moved or what is there. However, on the petrophysics/log analysis side, it is just a snapshot in that time unless more data is obtained.
So is it your testimony to the commission that even there is a heavy uncertainty associated with your log analysis in terms of present day?
Can you repeat, please?
Can you talk about, based on what you just explained to the commission, can you comment on the fact that there is a huge, or let's say there is a high uncertainty associated with any of the petrophysical analysis that has been presented to the commission, specifically your petrophysical analysis presented to the commission considering the present day?
I do not remember when the last log was obtained out of the logs we analyzed. Of those values, one's obtained more recent or after the injection has commenced, and depending on proximity to that injection site, could show effects of water injection.
So as of now, you cannot comment on, let's say, the potential impact of injecting over 100-something million barrels into the San Andres, unless the current petrophysical analysis more or less pertaining to the oil currently in place.
Correct.
Thank you. Did you estimate permeability as part of your analysis?
I did.
And what was the typical range that you estimated?
The zones were anywhere within the San Andres. I'm going to refer just to the San Andres, was between 0.01 millidarcy and 10 millidarcies.
Thank you for that. Now, in your testimony, you made mention to the fact that, and I will read, but let me see if I can get, on page 23 of 29. So I'm reading from the, this will be the water saturation parameter scenario in Lee County for Empire. On page 23 of that document, I read from under the original analysis, I read down a little bit. You're saying that on the other hand, core permeability to estimated permeability looked scattered due to the possible fractured reservoir. Do you recall that statement?
Yes, sir.
Is there an approach to estimate the permeability for fractured reservoirs?
Yes, there's many approaches to calculating fractured permeability.
So why, if you believe strongly that the reservoir is fractured, and thereby you are not getting closer to the actual permeability that was predicted based on the correlation that you used, and you are making a statement right here attributing that this reservoir could be a possible fractured reservoir. Why did you not try that?
The problem is when determining natural fractures and their contribution to a reservoir is that predicting natural fractures is extremely difficult, as in and of themselves, natural fractures occur due to many different stresses and therefore cannot be quantified. Overall, as a reservoir, it can be measured in a wellbore situation if the data is obtained at the time that it is exposed.
Were you here when were you on the platform when Mr. Merrick was providing his testimony?
I was.
Then I presume you also listened to the redirect from Mr. Padilla when he talked about permeability estimations are based on the rock type, are based on the actual geology of the formation. So you did the estimation of the permeability. You know, you run the models, you use assistant correlations to match that. Now, if I'm to tell you that, let's say your input parameters more or less probably was used for the reservoir simulation, and in estimating permeabilities in the range of, let's say, 0.001 to like, let's say 10 millidarcy, but a permeability of about 500 to 550 millidarcy was utilized as KV to tell the commission that there is a communication between two zones. Can you comment on that?
No, sir, as I cannot determine from a value given to me, whether from core or from a log calculation, whether the permeability I'm given is KV or KH.
Okay. So you are estimating 91.5 million barrels of oil per session. That is on the higher side. And then on the lower side is 15 million barrels of oil per session. What type of oil are you estimating here?
We are looking purely at hydrocarbon saturation within the zone, and we used an expansion coefficient of 1.3 in that calculation.
So it's not your testimony that this oil that you estimated is an ROZ.
No, sir, I was not asked to make the determination of an ROZ or not.
So Mr. Ryan Bailey also presented his testimony to the commission, and he also estimated oil in place of 629.62 million barrels of oil on the lower side, and then on the higher side, 1,049.75 million barrels of oil on the higher side. How does this number compare to your estimation?
In which was that just having not reviewed his testimony or his data, was that across a number of wells? Was that a range from it? Could you be a little more specific on the data that covers, sir?
Give me a second. So in his testimony, it is across multiple wells that he built structural models and then also isopac maps and also saturation maps, presumably, probably from your input as well. So yeah, from multiple wells.
And the oil in place, that is a total oil in place over the entire acreage, sir? Or is that in a per section basis, or what are the values there?
So as far as I remember, this is more or less based on the boundary of the EMSU.
Sir, it's difficult for me to make that comparison to what we did as we did our in-place volumetrics on a per section basis. And I would need to, although I have seen the map of the size of EMSU, I've not done that calculation out to make that comparison for you.
So when you say per session, can you tell the commission the area that you are looking at?
On a per section, a section is a 640 acre unit.
So your analysis would just strictly be within, let's say, one well drainage area basis.
It was outside our purview to do the work to determine the drainage radius of single well, sir.
You know, based on your testimony and the cross, it sounds to me, you know, I want to ask you, are you in any way doubting the core analysis, saturation estimation?
Given the information given to us on the values, I do not know enough to doubt the values. However, in my expertise, saturation values from core can be suspect.
So if your client is using that values, that information, I mean, to tell the commission to, you know, to terminate permits, I mean, is that your testimony that there is a huge uncertainty surrounding even the actual hard data?
Sir, even using the conservative low case estimate, there is still hydrocarbon in place in the San Andres as calculated out.
Yeah, I believe the commission also, we do have the, we also need to know if it is there, how much is there? Is it recoverable or not? Right. So just being there, I need to know more, you know, because you are setting a very high bar here that, you know, I feel like, yeah, we need to know more. I'm going to ask you the same questions that I asked Mr. Beckhead. during his testimony. Is it possible that potential changes in wettability of the system can impede the available oil saturation in present day?
The changes in wettability can cause recoverable hydrocarbons to be vastly different.
And do you know, based on your analysis, what type of wettability are we dealing with?
Based off of this, I am not sure of the San Andres in and of itself. Being a mixed wettable system is fairly common.
Okay, so probably could have been more or less, let's say, heavy oil wet, and now generally in the San Andres is mixed wet. Is that your testimony?
Yes, sir.
Now, due to the higher volume of the water injected into the San Andres, there is a possible reservoir pressure increase. Do you believe this can reduce the capillary forces holding the residual oil in place?
In this case, sir, that is outside my purview as a log analyst.
As a log analyst, but I thought log analysts have expertise in wettability, in estimation. If, let's say, if a log analyst do have the expertise to calculate how much oil is in place, I'm not sure if you can say that wettability, or let's say the capillary forces and all of that is not in your purview, but I will take that. Another question. Can you comment on the fact that the higher injection volume might have already increased the viscous forces, overcoming the capillary trapping and subsequently reducing the residual oil in place?
No, sir, I cannot comment on that.
So, based on all the discussions that we've had today and even previously, at least the ones that you listened to, don't you believe that, based on your experience, that there is a quite number of uncertainty associated with these estimates that you are presenting to the commission?
Yes, sir.
And I'll give you my last question here, that if you had more time and resources, is there anything that you could have done differently, especially in your approach, quantifying the MNN?
Sir, given unlimited resources and data, then absolutely there are ways to do that. There is additional data that can be obtained. Ideally, in every well, I would have a core and all these values would be measured, and therefore uncertainty would be reduced drastically. Quite often, though, in these, the data sets are less than ideal, and therefore inferences have to be made and calculated from there.
I appreciate your time, and thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ampoma. So back to you, Ms. Shaheen, for a redirect.
Thank you, Mr. Examiner. Do you recall your testimony earlier when Mr. Rankin asked you about whether you had reviewed a variety of other types of information and data in performing your analysis?
Yes.
Is there a need, in your opinion, in conducting the analysis that NewTek performed, is there a need to review the EMSU unit documents or case file?
No.
Is there a need to review the hearing transcripts from the unit proceeding?
No.
Is there a need to review exhibits from that proceeding? Well, excuse me, is there a need to review exhibits from that proceeding?
No.
Is there a need to review well files,
No,
production data,
no,
fluid flow?
no,
And you regularly perform work for other clients using the new look process, correct?
yes,
Did you do anything different for Empire than you would do for any of your other clients?
no.
Dr. Ampoma asked you which opinion, if you will, the commission should accept, the low end or the high end. Do you recall his question on that front?
I do.
Would it be accurate to say that regardless which one may be more correct, it's somewhere in the middle, as you said, there is oil down there?
That is correct.
And the uncertainties that exist are within that range, correct?
Yes.
No further questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Shaheen. Now, may this witness be excused?
I believe so.
All right, Mr. Dillon, thank you for your time here today, and you're free to leave. Let's see, it's 4:12 in the afternoon. Let me ask Chairman Rosatos, what are your thoughts at this point, Chairman? We could obviously, I suppose, Ms. Shaheen, assuming he's available, we could take the next witness, Joe McShane.
That is correct.
Okay, or we could start with him in the morning.
Miss Shaheen, quick question for you. How long do you think your opening testimony with the next witness is going to take?
No more than 30 minutes.
So, Mr. Hearing Officer and all parties involved, do you want to at least spend the next 30 minutes to hear the opening statements of the next witness, and then we can start the questioning tomorrow, Mr. Rankin?
Yes, please.
Okay, Mr. Moender?
Yes, we could proceed.
Okay, Mr. Beck?
Yes.
Mr. Swazo?
That's fine with Pilot.
Awesome. I think, Mr. Hearing Officer, let's put the next witness on. Let's give it the half hour, and then we can wrap it up and call it a day.
All right, Mr. Chairman, that sounds like a plan. Will
you,
Mr. McShane appear remotely?
Mr. McShane is here in
There he
person,
is.
but I'm hoping you can give me a few minutes just to get my ducks in a row.
Okay, the clock is ticking though.
Can we have 5 minutes?
Sure, Mr. McShane, if you want to take the witness stand, I'll swear you in. If you'll raise your right hand, please, sir. And you swear and affirm the testimony you give here today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury.
I do.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Not yet. But I will.
Just so you know, Ms. Shaheen, your microphone is on, so we can hear you.
Good afternoon, Mr. McShane. Could you please state your name for the record?
Joe McShane.
And who are you employed with and in what capacity?
I'm employed as a senior geologist for Empire Petroleum Corp.
And are you testifying today as an expert in petroleum geology?
Yes,
And you've attached your credentials to your written testimony in this matter?
I have.
I move that Mr. McShane be qualified as an expert witness in petroleum geology in this matter.
Any
No.
objection, Mr. Rankin?
None.
Mr. Moander?
No.
Mr. Beck?
No.
Mr. Swazo?
No objection.
He'll be so recognized.
Thank you. Mr. McShane, you first submitted direct written testimony explaining the results of your opinions, your testimony as Empire's Exhibit G on August 26, 2024. Is that correct?
Yes,
And you also submitted revised testimony on December 4th, 2024 as revised Exhibit G. Is that right?
yes.
Why did you submit revised testimony?
Between the two dates, we had asked New Tech to run another pass at their model utilizing additional core data that we delivered to them. And when we got the range of their results, I erred on the side of using the low side estimates for oil in place and revised my testimony.
Do you have any corrections to your revised Exhibit G?
No,
Other than the revisions in your revised Exhibit G, do you have any corrections to your original Exhibit G?
no,
Do you affirm that the statements made in your revised Exhibit G are correct and adopt that as your sworn testimony here today?
I do.
And subject to the revisions that you made in your revised Exhibit G, do you also